Bienvenidos a un programa más de la serie. Hoy en adelante, cómo ayudar a sus hijos adolescentes creando relaciones de respeto. También un reportaje sobre Alterra y su práctica de comercio justo con los sembradores de café. Y el restaurante Cempazuchi ofrece comida tradicional del estado de Oaxaca, México. La adolescencia es una de las etapas de desarrollo del ser humano de mayor complejidad y de la que dependerá la vida futura de los jóvenes. Enseguida, algunos puntos sobre cómo establecer una relación con los hijos basada en el respeto y en el establecimiento de límites y reglas.
Ser padres en estos días podría resultar un poco complicado, y especialmente aquí en este país, donde las costumbres y el modo de vivir son muy diferentes a nuestros países de origen. Esta nueva forma de vivir puede confundir a nuestros jóvenes adolescentes. Muchas veces, al verse solos, porque papá y mamá están siempre trabajando para darles una mejor vida, cosa que poco a poco puede ser que puedan estar perdiendo el control sobre ellos.
Para no perder ese control, los padres tienen que entender que tenemos que ser no solamente amigos con nuestros hijos, los jóvenes, pero primeramente ser padres. Y lo que ellos necesitan primeramente es ser padre y amigos segundo. Para no perder esa relación con nuestros jóvenes, ellos tienen que saber que los padres lo ven bien importante. ¿Okay? Sí hay esa tensión de las calles, de ese ambiente que lo están buscando. Mira, venga acá, deja los valores. Nosotros latinos tenemos valores muy lindos. Por ejemplo, para mí me gusta comer y cenar con mis hijos juntos, sin la televisión, por lo menos 10-15 minutos, ¿okay? Para que ellos siempre sepan que somos unidos, una familia unida. Mucha gente cree que la droga, el alcohol, los vicios, las gangas es el problema. Eso no es el problema. El problema es, tenemos que preguntarnos por qué quieren irse con las drogas, las gangas, el alcohol, todos esos vicios negativos. Y es porque jóvenes están buscando para sentirse parte de nuestra comunidad, de nuestra familia, y están buscando su valor. Si ellos saben que los padres lo aman, ¿ok? Y tú eres alguien importante en esta familia, en esta comunidad, ¿ok? Y si ellos conocen ese valor de adentro, ¿ok? Comenzando de pequeño, no tienen razón para ir en las drogas. Las drogas es como, y la ganga y el alcohol es para yo sentirme importante en esta comunidad, para que ellos me puedan ver, yo soy importante aquí.
Pero si usted como padre siente que ya perdió el control sobre sus hijos, o simplemente quiere tenerlos ocupados, existen programas en la ciudad que los pueden ayudar, como uno que ofrecen en el Centro de la Comunidad Unida.
Life Changers es un programa donde yo traigo un invitado, alguien que estuvo en las drogas, en las gangas, en los vicios bien fuertes, gente que estaba en la cárcel, y yo le doy una entrevista cómo ellos cambiaron su vida de una vida negativa a una vida positiva. Hay diferentes actividades. Nosotros llevamos a los jóvenes a ver los juegos de los Bucks, del baloncesto, de los Brewers. Nosotros tenemos fiestas de pizza, de helado, ice cream, solamente pasando tiempo calidad con ellos. Este programa de Life Changers ayuda al estudiante no solamente en la escuela, en la comunidad socialmente, pero especialmente en su casa. ¿Okay? Nosotros hablamos mucho de cómo tener el respeto con sus padres, algo para nosotros es muy importante. Y nosotros hablamos con estos jóvenes y dejándole esa oportunidad para expresarse, porque el problema no es que no quiere tener ese respeto con sus padres. Hay algo más adentro en su corazón hay un dolor de algo que pasó en el pasado. Hay algunos tips que yo recomiendo y uno de ellos es primeramente oírlo. Okay, tenemos que darle oportunidad. Nosotros como padres latinos, mira, tú sabes que tú no vas a hacer nada en esta vida y esto, todo negativo. Y hablando y a veces, pero papi, yo quiero... No me diga nada, no me falta de respeto, todavía estoy hablando. Okay? Y oírlo, darle una oportunidad de dejarlo a ellos expresarse. Eso es uno. El segundo es buscar lo positivo en los jóvenes. Siempre cuando un joven, a veces estamos calladitos en la casa y cuando vemos algo negativo en la casa, mira, no haga eso, hazlo en esta manera porque no, enseguidita, en vez de buscar lo positivo, mijo, te vi estudiando por 1 hora en su cuarto, me gusta eso, tú vas a hacer algo en su vida, ¿ok? Y el tercer es pasar tiempo calidad con ellos. Y quizás no tiene que ir a un juego de los Bucks o los Brewers, solamente ir al parque a jugar con sus jóvenes. El tiempo calidad, muchas veces yo digo, déjame comprarle esos zapatos de Jordan, déjame comprarle esto y quizás le gano su corazón. La cosa más importante es pasar ese tiempo calidad con ellos.
Otra de las cosas que pueden ayudar a que su hijo esté lejos de tentaciones es tenerlos ocupados y que pasen su tiempo en cosas positivas.
Para mí, ser un voluntario en su comunidad es algo muy, muy importante. Eso ayuda a un joven a crecer, ser un líder muy, muy positivo. Otro es el ejercicio. Es algo muy importante para ir a correr, jugar béisbol, el fútbol, básquetbol, para dejar esas cosas del estrés que le está dañando y a veces uno quiere dejar estas cosas haciendo una forma de hacer ejercicio. 3, pasar tiempo con amigos positivos. Algo muy, muy importante. Alguien que te va a aconsejar, quizá va a ser un líder en la comunidad. Tenemos muchos amigos, gente que trabajan aquí en UCC que le encanta pasar tiempo positivo con los jóvenes.
También es importante que como padres mantengan un balance entre el trabajo y sus hijos. Que el trabajo no consuma todo su tiempo. Debe programar un tiempo para poder pasar con sus hijos. Y si por muchas razones deben dejarlos solos, saber qué es lo que harán, conocer a los amigos de sus hijos, vigilar y orientar acerca de la música que escuchan, de las películas que ven y sobre todo tener mucho cuidado con los videojuegos, ya que por lo general contienen mucha violencia.
Para un padre, conocer esos amigos de sus hijos, de nuevo, hacer preguntas. Y muchos de nosotros amamos a nuestros hijos tanto. Mira, yo no quiero que tú pases tiempo con ese porque ese es un títere, él es un joven muy negativo. En vez de decir cómo yo, como un padre positivo, puedo ayudar a ese joven y quizás pasar tiempo con él, llevarlo contigo. Este fin de semana yo fui con mi familia a Wisconsin Dells y yo llevé el amigo de mi hijo. Yo le dije, mira, venga con nosotros, porque él vive en una área de Milwaukee donde hay tantas gangas, drogas y cosas negativas. Y yo quise que ese niño, mira, pase tiempo con una familia positiva. En vez de solamente, mira, no, aléjate. ¿Cómo nosotros podemos ayudarle a eso? Y si ese joven quizás no quiere hacer cosas positivas o no quiere cambiar, pues tú sabes que buena suerte. Pero tú no vas a hacer esto con mi hijo. Y hay una forma de hablarle a los jóvenes. Si hay un joven negativo, por favor, háblale todavía con el respeto. Tantos años que yo he pasado hablándole, haciendo entrevistas a muchos que estaban en las drogas, en las gangas, todavía ellos están buscando una cosa, respeto.
Ser padre muchas veces puede ser una tarea muy difícil, pero con mucha paciencia, amor y sobre todo una vigilancia constante y manteniendo sus cuerpos y mentes ocupados, se puede lograr que un adolescente quiera tomar el buen camino y tener un futuro brillante.
Actualmente, cada vez más consumidores son más selectivos en la compra de productos y muchos de ellos buscan por etiquetas de Fair Trade, o sea, de comercio justo. ¿Pero qué significa este concepto? En este reportaje de Scott Rivera veremos cómo Alterra emplea prácticas de comercio justo para motivar a los sembradores de café a producir los más finos productos del mundo.
In the world of coffee, for a transaction to be certified as fair trade, that transaction has to satisfy a certain number of criteria. The most important of which is that a certain amount of money has to be paid for the coffee so that the producer of the coffee is making a sustainable living producing the coffee. So they're motivated to keep producing that great coffee year after year, and they're not constantly in deficit or exposed to very difficult credit situations.
Fair Trade certification is really designed to help the small-scale coffee producers, farmers that have small plots of land, and ones that are organized into cooperatives, particularly when conditions in the market are low, so low that they can't earn a high price for their coffee.
The monitoring organization which certifies that participating traders are following fair trade guidelines is Transfer USA.
We have been buying coffee that is fairly traded coffee from producers, particularly in Mexico. There's a co-op in Mexico with whom we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. It's coming up on 11 actually, called Culactic in Chiapas. And we've been buying coffee from them following basically fair trade guidelines. So this pursuit of a fair transaction is something that Alterra's been working on for years, and Transfer has kind of formalized that approach, and as a result it makes it much easier for companies like Alterra and much easier for consumers to understand. And these coffee growers, like a lot of small business people, they require cash at certain times of the year before their sale. Basically, soon before their sale, their cash dries up. What happens in these fair trade transactions is the small producer is able to avoid entangling credit relationships where they're forced into selling their coffee at very low prices where they have no leverage. If you think about a community of coffee growers, and this reality multiplied times 50 or times 300, what happens then is all of these coffee growers are getting access to money when they need it, and then able to sell their coffee at reasonable prices when it's available. School fees become reasonable. Simple but adequate health care becomes possible. Simple infrastructure construction becomes feasible. Purchase of company vehicles, trucks to move their raw material around becomes possible. And we've seen these exact things that I'm mentioning happen in many of the coffee producing communities that we're engaged in.
The highest quality coffees, most of the coffees that we buy are grown between 1,300 meters and 2,000 meters of elevation. And they're not grown in the cities, obviously. They're grown out in the campo. This last trip we took to Honduras, we were several hours from the nearest city, and we just spent the night at staying at farmers' houses and things like that. And you really get a strong sense for the place where the coffee comes from when you actually stay with the people who produce the coffee. Consumers are more curious about where their products are coming from. So when we market our coffees in our cafes, we don't just rely on the fair trade sticker to tell the story. We really want to lead with what the coffee tastes like, why it's high quality coffee, and how it's different from other coffees. Well, this is cupping. This is a sort of industry standard way to taste coffee. If everybody cups the same way, we all have a common language for how coffee tastes. Producers and coffee buyers and roasters and exporters can all communicate using the same language about the coffee. So, what I've done is I've ground 12 grams of coffee into this 6-ounce bowl. The one obvious thing about the cupping process is that there's no filter. It's just coffee mixed with water. And what we do is we let this steep for about 4 minutes, and then when that time is up, we break through this crust layer that is formed on the top of this bowl. When you break through that crust on top of the bowl with your spoon, you really unlock a tremendous amount of information about the coffee. I mean, there are so many volatile aromatics that erupt from underneath that crust when you break that you really want to make sure you're right there to take it all in. And we've cleared the grounds off the top. Now we've got a bowl full of brewed coffee, but there is a layer of grounds still in the bottom of this bowl. And now that the coffees have cooled down enough to taste, we take our cupping spoon and we skim a little bit of the coffee from one bowl, and then what we do is we want to slurp it and really just spray it across our palate all at once, trying to atomize the coffee as much as possible to get the best sensory image or snapshot of that coffee as we can. On our tongue. So, cupping this much coffee, if you don't spit it out, you get more caffeinated than you ever want to be. These are nice coffees. Good acidity, good kind of ripe, dark berry fruit.
There isn't a lot of great coffee. There's a lot of decent coffee, but the really great coffee is hard to find and expensive, most importantly expensive to produce. In order to motivate the producer to do some of the things, the coffee grower, to do some of the things that result in very special, fantastic coffee, they got to make money. They got to make enough money. It's very hard to say to the producer, we really feel like if you were out there in the fields picking every day during this window of 2 months, you would succeed in picking the ripest possible cherries. The coffee would be sweet and dense, and our customers would love it, and we'd like to buy it at a discount. You have to say, instead, we want you to get out there and get after the coffee and do the things that you know you got to do that results in the best possible quality, and don't worry, we'll pay you. We'll pay you a premium so that you feel really good about the work that you put in and the product that you got out. Then we can come next year and say, hey, this really worked well last year. Our customers loved your coffee. We promoted it accordingly, and they're really interested in getting it again. Let's do this transaction again. Call it what you want. You want to call it fair trade, or you want to call it sustainable. What it is to us is a reasonable economic relationship between a buyer and a producer. And if you continue to engage on that level with these coffee growers, it'll go on for year after year after year, and that's really what we want.
El restaurante Cempazuchi ofrece platillos con el tradicional estilo de la comida oaxaqueña de México. Scott Rivera nos presenta este reportaje.
When you go to Mexico and you talk to somebody about making mole, every family's got their own recipe. They're very proud of it, and it's always been made there, and this is the way grandma made it, or great-grandma, or something like that, and it's been handed down. You know, when you look at a book, you'll see all these different ideas and stuff like that, but we've kind of got a recipe that we've been using since we opened, and we think it's real good. You basically kind of roast everything first. What you do is kind of just give it some flavor. You roast the chilies, you roast your peanuts, you actually char the breads and the tortillas to give it, you don't burn them, but you char them because you need them to get that's part of it's where the color comes from. A lot of times that darker color comes from the charring and things like that, or the chilies and the breads and stuff like that. Once you get all those ingredients roasted and things like that, then you put them in a blender, you blend up everything, adding some chicken stock to it to kind of get the consistency. As you blend it up, you kind of got to be careful because you're talking about peanuts and nuts and things like that. So it takes a while to do that. And if you're doing it at home, that's the other thing too. A lot of times people think mole takes a long time to make, and it really does because there's so many different ingredients and there's so many different steps to it. I mean, when you're in a commercial kitchen and you do this every day, it makes it look like it's an easy process, but I mean, it's, you know, if you have to go out and buy every one of those ingredients and look for them in a store and things like that, it can get, like I said, it can be time consuming. 9 years ago when we opened, we knew Brady Street was kind of coming back around, and it was always kind of a hip, kind of trendy, you know, more cutting edge area. Our food was a little different, so a lot of times when people would come in the door the first time, they'd go, well, this isn't Mexican food, and it's like, well, yeah, it really is Mexican food. It's just not what you're used to, you know. And when people start looking at the map of Mexico and realizing what a large country it is, and it's surrounded by oceans and things like that, I mean, there's just so many different things, you know, from seafood and like beef and things like that in the northern part, and the southern part it's a lot more vegetarian oriented and things like that. So there are just a lot of different ideas that you could do that hadn't been done yet in Milwaukee. And today what we made in the kitchen was we did mole poblano, which is one of the most classic dishes in Mexico. It originates from Puebla, which is just east of Mexico City, and according to most legends, it was the first mole that was ever made, and it was supposedly designed by the nuns in a convent when one of the bigwigs from Spain was coming over, and so all the nuns kind of decided that each one should provide something, and so they kind of started making this sauce for the meats, and each one put their own little thing into it, and so the next thing you know, there's 30-40 ingredients in this mole, and it's a very complex, rich sauce, and most people consider it, the first thing they think of it is that it's a chocolate sauce, but chocolate is like, again, one of like possibly 30 ingredients that go into this mole, so you shouldn't taste chocolate. It should just be one of the ingredients in there. It's got 4 different chilies. You've got chili ancho, you have chili mulatto, the pasilla, and then the chipotle. And what we do then is you basically soak all those chilies, let them kind of soften up and get not so crisp and firm. And then you take all the other ingredients, things like peanuts, toasted tortillas, toasted bread, there's tomatoes, there's tomatillas, lots of different spices. One of the moles, the mole negro, which is a classic one from Oaxaca, I mean, that takes sometimes 2 to 3 days because there's just so many ingredients and you need it to sit for a while. After you've kind of blended everything together and added your chicken stock and got it into a consistency, then you basically put this whole thing on the stove, and I mean, you basically just let it simmer. And I mean, mole can take anywhere from 45 minutes, half hour to simmer on the stove to kind of cook down, get a consistency that's right. And like I said, and at that point, that's when you add some of the chocolate to it, just to give it another characteristic. But again, it shouldn't taste like chocolate. After that, it's cooked down, and then you just let it simmer and get it to a nice consistency. And basically, what mole means mixture, and so it's all these different ingredients to make a sauce, and that's really what it is. It's a sauce that goes over different types of meat or vegetables. And if you go to a Mexican restaurant in Mexico, you'll get this little piece of meat on the plate and a big plate full of mole and a big basket full of tortillas, because I mean, you don't want to waste any of the sauce. I mean, it's really more about the mole than it's about what the meat is on it. And the other dish that we made today was tostadas Florentino, which is a vegetarian style tostada that we do here. It's made with a black bean spread, there's tomatoes, there's goat cheese, and then we do sauteed spinach on top of that. And then that spinach is sauteed with a little bit of cilantro and some garlic, and it's just very, quickly done, sauteed. It's a very simple dish, but I mean, it's just a lot of good flavors in it. We started that out as an appetizer special, and so many people liked it that we ended up putting it on the menu because we just got so many requests for it. So again, it's real simple, but just real good flavors and pretty healthy.
Al final de un programa más, por favor déjenos saber sus comentarios en nuestro teléfono 297-7544 o escríbanos a nuestra dirección de correo electrónico en adelante@matc.edu y visítenos en nuestro sitio del internet en mptv.org. Sintonícenos en canal 10.1 HD todos los martes a las 6:30 de la tarde y en canal 36.1 DT los miércoles a las 12:30 de la medianoche y los domingos a las 5:30 de la tarde. Soy Patricia Gomez, muy buenas noches.